The Crusades by Argyle. The Crusades all started when Muslims, Christians, and Jews all believed they should control Jerusalem. They all considered Jerusalem the Holy Land because in each one of the religions something significant happened there. For the Muslims, they believed that Muhammad ascended into heaven in Jerusalem. For the Jews, that some very important things happened here and some important temples were created there. For Christians, it is a city in which Jesus was crucified and he rose from the dead. Since this city was considered the Holy Land in all three of the religions, it has caused tons of controversy, which still continues today. Seljuks started to take over lots of countries starting from India, as they wanted to continue to build their empire. As they continued to take over more countries in the Middle East, they grew closer and closer to the holy city, Jerusalem. Until this time, all the Muslims, Christians, and Jews got along together, with the Muslims being in charge of Jerusalem, as Christians and Jews could take pilgrimages there with no harm. Then later, Christian churches were being destroyed and Muslims hijacked trains and captured and took people hostage. This got told to the Christians, and they wanted to start a war to try and regain power in Jerusalem. Christians tried to convince the people to join the Crusades by telling them that they would go to heaven if they joined the fight. People would also try to join the fight because they saw it as an opportunity to do some business. The First Crusade was led by Pope Urban II. There were many positive things in which the Christians did come away with. They also had minimal negative things happen to them. One huge economic change for the Christians were the amount of things that they discovered and traded for during the time they were in the Middle East. Some of these things were chemistry, irrigation, and pain-killing drugs, chess, algebra, mirrors, carpets, cotton cloth for clothing, ships, compasses, writing paper, wheelbarrows, mattresses, shawls, rice, coffee, sherbet, dates, apricots, lemons, sugar, spices such as ginger, melons, and rhubarb. One thing that Christians did not like was that Richard I had to raise taxes to extreme heights in order to fund the Crusades. This was able for Christians to develop banks and loans which are still used today. One big social change for Christians was there was no longer the feudal system. This is a huge change in society of European towns. This was happening because of the reputation of kings and queens were raising with King Richard and Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand. Also a huge social change, of course, were people dying in the Crusades. People would have pretty awful lives during the Middle East.
For the Jews, the Crusades was an awful time period, as they lost their reputation and many more were dying. By the end of the Crusades, the Jewish economic system was not very good. The Jews could not hold public office, and the Christians had to take over their public office. Also, they were kicked out of many countries, including France and England. They endured extreme amounts of pain and violence, as they were both persecuted in Europe and in the Middle East by the Crusaders. They were tortured until they accepted Christianity, and whole groups of Jews were persecuted after being in the Crusaders' way in Germany and France. Also, Jewish holy books were burned. Before the Crusaders, they actually were living in harmony and protected by the Pope. More than 10,000 were killed during the Crusades. In the 14th and 15th century, the Jews were forced to go live in ghettos, which are small, crowded neighborhoods. The Crusades for Muslims was not a very good time, but it wasn't a very bad time either. They did not gain too much from trading with the Crusaders, as they already had a lot of the stuff because they were much more civilized than them. They did gain some weapons from the Crusaders, and they figured out about a standing army. A huge number of people died from the Muslims, which was a huge social change for them. The Muslims also gained money from trades for the Crusaders, and they were able to fund projects like mosques and religious schools. They also found a new leader in Saladin, who became a very big figure in Muslim history. They lost some land, in Europe from the Crusades. However, they still have a huge part of land after in the Middle East.